Copyright notice, copyright 2026, Sirius Lee Peter. All rights reserved. Silencing the Cynic. 0 to 360. Another mathematical illusion of mind is an original work. No portion of this publication may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means without prior written permission from the author, except for brief quotations used in reviews, scholarly works, or educational discussion with proper attribution. The concepts, terminology, and framework known as mathematical phenomenology and hermeneutics are part of the author's original body of work and may not be republished or presented as original scholarship without acknowledgement of the source. The ideas presented in this essay are offered for educational, philosophical, and spiritual reflection. They are not intended as psychological, medical, legal, financial, or professional advice. Readers are encouraged to engage the material thoughtfully and draw their own conclusions. Forward. Note on the word cynicism. When words drift in everyday speech, a little philosophical housekeeping helps. Cynicism is one of those travelers that picked up extra luggage along the centuries. In this work, cynicism is not used to mean mere sarcasm, pessimism, or a bad attitude. Philosophically speaking, cynicism refers to a habit of mind that assumes the worst motives behind human actions and dismisses the possibility of sincerity, goodness, or higher meaning. The term traces back to the ancient Greek school associated with Diogenes of Sinope, whose followers were called kynikoi, dog-like, for their rejection of social convention. Over time, however, the word drifted from its original philosophical movement into a psychological posture, a reflexive distrust that treats ideals, faith, or moral aspiration as naive illusions. In that sense, cynicism is not simply skepticism. It is skepticism hardened into dismissal, a lens through which hope, belief, and sincerity are interpreted as weakness or deception. Preface. Why illusion? I'm too knowledgeable to know anything, so I speak in mathematical and biblical illusion. The Bible knows the ledge and math knows the ledge. I'm just a parabolic builder, bridging these ledges with parables, parabolas, homonyms, and metaphors about my love. Except for the exceptionally focused. Accessing the higher dimensions is table talk, without understanding the basics of the second and third dimensions. The mind has to grasp planar space before mastering interplanar spacing. That's mathematical. If you can't get it to work on Earth, it's mind drift. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. Matthew chapter 13, verse 13. Let's create a parabolic antenna and radiate the signal. Me, January 14th, 2026. Silencing the Cynic. 0 to 360. Completion and beginning share the same point in space. In mathematics, this is ordinary. In life, it can take years to recognize. I know that I didn't arrive here in a moment of philosophical brilliance. It was discovered the slow way, the mathematical way, by circling a problem until the point was revealed. On the unit circle, 0 degrees and 360 degrees occupy the same point. You begin at one spot and go the entire distance of whatever it is you may be cycling. You may even feel a sense of completion at the end of this cycle, but then you may notice something familiar and realize that you're exactly where you began. Older, hopefully wiser, but the same location nonetheless. This can either be a discouraging experience or an experience of growth to be used. Geometry does not reward the longer journey with a new coordinate. The point doesn't change. We either learn to use it or begin again. When I first noticed this, beyond the obvious mathematics, it felt less like a mathematical coincidence and more like a confession about the human mind. Especially the cynical mind. Part 1. The first silenced cynic. This discussion about cynicism isn't judgment, but recognition. A testimony. An odyssey of recollection about a mindmate I lived with for years. The cynic is persuasive because it sounds intelligent. It presents itself as caution, discernment, and intellectual maturity. In a culture that has watched charismatic certainty collapse again and again, that posture feels responsible. And I understand the instinct. The last century gave us plenty of reasons to be careful when someone speaks with too much conviction. In the 90s, every long-haired holy boy who promised heaven eventually drifted toward Babylon. Society has learned to flinch. I still flinch, so the question became deeply practical for me. How do I share what I've learned about endurance, renewal, and salvation mathematically? Better yet, how do I speak about the beauty of God and mathematics without sounding like a cult leader? That sentence may sound humorous on the surface, but it launched one of the most disciplined intellectual battles of my life. Interestingly, I discovered that you can't talk about God or any level of soul-mind tending without encountering the word cult. When my circle began, cultura animi. The word cult has a dark reputation in modern conversation, which is unfortunate because its older roots aren't sinister. It comes from the Latin cultus, meaning to tend or to care for, the same root that gives us the word culture and cultivate. The Roman philosopher Cicero used the phrase cultura animi, which literally means the cultivation of the soul or mind. In this sense, tending the inner life is like cultivating a garden. You plant seeds, pull weeds, water, prune, and patiently use time and sun to shape the landscape, a cycle of seasons. Unfortunately, somewhere along the centuries, cultivation of the mind garden acquired a bad public relations department. Still, the original idea remains quietly sensible. The land of the human mind will grow what is cultivated, like every other land on earth. My cultura animi began with loss. Unfortunately, many do. When the reaper clears the land, the fields must be cultivated again. When my husband died, my mental landscape was terraformed. Some losses are paradigm shifts that rearrange reality and alter time. So the work began. The difference between cult and cultivation of the mind isn't about being devoted, but the freedom of the mind to choose its devotion. The freedom to cultivate what you wish to grow. What followed became a 7-year cycle of study, observation, reflection, testing, and surviving. I kept encountering connections between mathematics, consciousness, scripture, and lived experience that refused to dissolve under scrutiny. That refusal created a problem. My inner cynic did not trust what I was shown. I didn't believe that the work was complete. I'd been in survival mode for so long that I failed to realize that I had survived. The new landscape differed so much that I figured I was just lost. Yes, I missed the point. So I began again. Grinding the circle. Cynicism rarely stops a person from thinking. What it does is keep the mind rotating. You test an idea from one angle, then another, then another. The analysis feels productive because you are always in motion. But motion is not the same as progress. Mathematically speaking, you can walk the entire circumference of a circle and arrive exactly where you started. That was my mental process. Not ruminating, but sorting. And each time I examined, the same insight returned. The same results appeared. The same alignment between mathematics and psychological experience continued to hold. And each time my inner cynic whispered the same objections. This will make you look naive. People will think you are irrational. Someone will call this cultish. Other cynics will accuse you of just trying to make money. Black women don't do this. Will I need white male authority to validate it? Note, this line references racism and sexism, two other hope-marauding isms. However, they cause doubt, and therefore fit this description. The accusation of foolishness is one of cynicism's most effective tools and silences. More insight than ignorance ever could. These fears are not imaginary. Anyone who speaks publicly with any insight will incite them. So I learned more, studied more. I was going to prove myself wrong.